Okay, and again, thank you so much, Max Beeks, for inviting me to this. It's an honor to talk to you, all of you guys. It wasn't so long ago that I was taking this class in the seats that you guys were in. I think I probably took this lecture class about 3 times to get the units in order to get full financial aid, and it's a great class, and I definitely learned a lot from the professionals that came in and shared their stories and experiences. Okay, so I'll just go ahead, my first couple slides here. Okay, so I kind of want to just gain a little bit of credibility and show you guys that I've actually really designed products. And so I think my experience, I've been a professional industrial designer for the past 5 years. I graduated in 2017, and ever since then I've been working full-time as an industrial designer. I would say probably more than full-time at some points. My experience, I think, has been quite unique when it comes to the variety of things that I've dealt with, not only with just the amount of products that I've designed in the different industries, but as well as just different environments that an industrial designer would typically go through. And so I hope to share those with you guys. So I started off my career at this company here. It's called Kingston Technology. And this would be considered a medium to large size company. And it depends on how you look at it. Like if you compare it to large market caps, it's certainly not like an Apple or Microsoft, but if you compare it to private companies, it's actually on the top of the list of largest companies privately held. And so it's a very interesting experience to design at a company such as this. And what I did a lot for them is I did a lot of flash drives, as you guys can see, a lot of SSDs and memory card readers. So not the most exciting products, but I definitely learned a lot when it came to designing products like these. Like when you look at them, it doesn't seem like anything fancy, right? But when you actually like get into it, there's a lot of limitations that has to do with like flash drive design. There's a lot of patents that you have to worry about. Since it's such a simple product, not a lot of function to it. Price really matters when it comes to designing a product like this. So like the materials that you end up picking or how many parts that it has, it's very important to really hit those target numbers. And so that's just something that I learned when I started designing products for this company, is that, you know, you have all these like crazy ambitions of wanting to design extreme stuff. And then you kind of learn that there's a ton of limitations when it comes to just something very simple as a flash drive. And so some of those limitations, like I said, are also patents. So you guys probably are aware about SanDisk. They're probably the #1 player when it comes to flash drives, and they own probably the best patents when it comes to flash drives. One of the better ones is like when you go about designing a flash drive, I think most designers want to think like, oh yeah, it would be cool if you could use it one-handed, you know, slide the USB connector in and out with your thumb using that switch. Whereas if you see here, I've used like removable caps, and there's limitations to that. But the reason why we have to do stuff like that is because SanDisk owns that patent and no other flash drive company can do it. And if you see other flash drive companies do it, they're essentially just breaking the patent and potentially would get sued or are getting sued. So if you see this one here on the right, the more black taller one with the lines on it. So this was my idea to kind of get around that sliding patent. And it's essentially like a sliding cap. How it works is that the outer housing actually slides in comparison to the actual connector and PCB. And so my goal was to hopefully achieve that same effect where you can slide with one-handed use and expose the connector. And then when you're not using it, you slide it back. And so it's a very simple solution, and I was actually very happy with how it turned out. And so kind of just got to be really creative when it comes to just trying to work around all of these limitations. And I'm very proud to work at Kingston. They're a great company to work for. And one company that they started within Kingston was a company called HyperX. And so this is a company that I currently work for now. It's a subsidiary of Kingston, but Kingston ended up selling it to HP. And so currently now HyperX is under the HP umbrella, which is where I'm working now. And so HP obviously is a really large company. It's a publicly held company. And so I thought Kingston at the time was a large company, but HP is even much larger than Kingston. And so just understanding the differences of working at a medium to large size company to a even larger market cap size company. It's a pretty big difference. I think a lot of it has to do with the decisions that you make. Like when you're a student, you come up with a design and a solution. You kind of think it's like, oh yeah, this is cool, this is really cool looking. But when it comes to actually making it and producing like hundreds and thousands of the same product, you almost have a lot of pressure on your shoulders to make sure that the decision that you made among all the other ones is the right decision. Because it ends up, affecting a lot of people, all the users that end up buying your product. So at HyperX, I designed a lot of these peripherals here for gamers. So specifically in PC gamers, anybody that pretty much games on a PC, and anybody that games on a console and a mobile device, such as like a phone or a Nintendo Switch. And so I love designing consumer electronics. I'm personally not a gamer myself, but I found myself in the gaming industry. I've always been in love with consumer electronics, like Apple products, always followed every review of Android phones and stuff like that. And I was very happy to be able to have the opportunity to design consumer electronics. And pretty much gaming peripherals here are essentially consumer electronics, but of course, with the specific intention to provide the most performance to the gamer. This year was a very fun, very, very interesting experience. So this was an opportunity where I was able to design on a television show on NBC's Golf Channel. The TV show was called Wilson's Driver versus Driver, and the whole point of it was pretty much to gather engineers, designers, golf enthusiasts to pretty much try to find out how to design the best driver they could possibly design. It's a elimination type of a TV show, so you go through the process, you pitch your idea in front of like golf pros and CEOs and those kind of people. That's very intimidating. And so it was an incredible experience to be able to do something like this. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to win first place, but I was the only contestant to be able to participate in both seasons. So season 1 and 2, that's what you see below here is season 1, and then above is season 2 design. And even though I'm not a golfer myself either, I don't play golf, I'm not interested in golf, I was able to achieve a 3rd place for both seasons. And so this was a very interesting experience to have as an industrial designer, and a great memory that I always kind of cherish as I think about what I've done so far with industrial design. Yeah, so this was the product that I designed. It was it's like this crazy laser device for dentists. Don't really specifically know how it works as far as the tech goes, but usability wise, the dentist pretty much grabs this handle here and sticks it into the person's mouth and operates it through the screen that you see. And so this was a pretty interesting experience to have working for a company like Biolase, because it felt like I was essentially running a design firm where I had to create a design process, pretty much pitch my ideas as a business owner, and convince them that my idea was the best, and all this kind of stuff. So it's a lot different experience than just being an employee at a company where you're an internal team member. And so I had to come up with like a structure on how I would charge them, and certain phases that we had to go through, which isn't really something that I had to do with those other companies that I showed you guys earlier. I did some work for a company called Thanks.com. They're a startup company, very similar to what you would find like on GrabCAD or TurboSquid, where if you're looking for a 3D model, you can go to the website, create an account, download a 3D model. So I worked with them and I created a couple different models where I provided on their website. And they were also a sponsorship for my YouTube channel. So I created all of these designs here on video. It's all documented. So every step of the way. So I went through the research phase, ideation phase, 3D modeling, 3D modeling and rendering. And so all that's documented. So if you're interested in seeing how I design these, you can definitely go and check out those videos. And for my YouTube channel, the reason why I started the channel, some of you may or may not know it. And the whole idea was that I always felt like I'm sitting in front of you guys talking, but personally, like internally for me, I feel like I'm just some guy that just learned industrial design and I did my thing. I always started off as like this dumb kid who didn't really come from anything. My parents were immigrants from Vietnam and we were really poor growing up. And the only things I really knew was that I had to get some kind of a college degree and be able to land a job. And then hopefully that job would bring in an income to where I wouldn't be a complete failure. And so one thing I was really good at as a kid was I was decent at drawing. And so I thought, okay, well, industrial design seems pretty cool. And it seems a lot more realistic than, say, just trying to be an artist. And so I really didn't know much about what industrial design was at the time. I kind of just closed my eyes and thought it was cool and hoped for the best and wished, you know, if I can really work hard at this, then something good could happen. And throughout the whole process, you know, like trying to not be a complete failure, I had a lot of concerns like, what is industrial design, if it was even going to work out for me. And so for the YouTube channel, my goal was to just share some of those thoughts that I had when I was going through Cal State Long Beach and talk about industrial design, try to relieve some of the concerns that I kind of know that other industrial designers would be having as well, and just share as much information as I could as I experienced and learned them myself. And so on the channel too, I also design some fun things that come to my mind. I'm really into cars, as you guys can see, and random stuff like a Bugatti computer mouse, a shoe, and so I designed these all on video too. So if you're interested, you could check those out as well. Okay, and this is probably the most rewarding out of all the jobs that I've had as an industrial designer, is designing industrial designers. And so I had an incredible opportunity to be able to teach junior studio in 2020, and it was a fantastic class. This is some of the work that was created in my class that I'm extremely proud of. There's just absolutely incredible work here, and so just being able to mold the designers, and I think that they already had natural talents themselves, but with just a little bit of guidance and pretty much just showing them what to do and how to go about doing it and how to think. I think that they all went off to graduate just last year, and I see a lot of them doing very, very well. And so it's just something that was extremely rewarding for me to be able to design these designers, and I hope to do some more of it in the future. So now that I'm here speaking with you guys, before I actually accepted Max's Beach invitation to speak here with you guys, I really just wanted to make sure that I had a topic that was really worth talking about with you guys, that I could really help as much as I can. And so before I accepted the invitation, I went through a couple of different ideas on what I can talk about with you guys. So of course, using the industrial design process, I came up with a couple of different concepts. So one of the ideas was maybe I could talk about how to build the best industrial design portfolio, because portfolio is pretty much key to showing off your skills, showing your experience, and impressing employers to land a job. So I thought that was incredibly important. Another idea kind of ran across my mind was maybe I could touch upon what's it like to actually be an industrial design student and then transitioning into the professional field, and maybe giving some tips on how you can actually navigate your first year as a professional industrial designer. Another idea I played around with was maybe what I could just talk about what's the best way to improve as an industrial designer. I'm sure some of you guys are probably struggling. Maybe you guys are comparing yourself with your classmates. You're probably thinking, man, how is that person so good? Like, what are the things that they're doing that are so good that I need to learn myself? And so I thought maybe I could share some of that with you guys and to help you understand the skills that you should really be focusing on to really improve your skills. And so my goal actually is to touch a little bit on all three of these topics, but the one that I actually landed on was this here. So this here is what I call the foundation of industrial design career. And I think this is important to talk about just because I don't really hear a lot of people talking about this kind of stuff, and I thought I might as well will be the one to talk about it. Because you know it really goes to the end of the idea of like, if you're going to build a skyscraper, it's going to need a good foundation to build upon, or else it's just going to come tumbling down. So I think as industrial designers, we all kind of get stuck on this like very high level design thinking, like, you know, how to create this very complex surface in SolidWorks, or, you know, how do I create, you know, certain kind of casting shadow in Keyshot or whatever. But a lot of those things are very high level things. And of course, you can always find those things on YouTube as far as the tutorial goes. But if you have a really strong foundation, it really allows all of those higher level things to be put in a good perspective. And so that's kind of what I wanted to touch upon is to really show you guys talking about the very beginning of industrial design, you know, prior to design 150 or whatever the first industrial design class you have to take at Cal State Long Beach. But a lot of the foundation topics really has to touch upon these three things. So I'm going to be talking about, is industrial design dead? Because of course, you know, we all have selected industrial design as our career, is what I'm assuming. Industrial design is what we want to do. And so I think it's important to ask, well, is industrial design dead? Did we pick a dead career? And if it isn't dead, then, well, is it even a good career? Because if industrial design, even if it isn't dead, doesn't mean it's going to be a good career, right? And so I wanted to ask that question, is industrial design a good career? And then that will lead to, well, if industrial design is a good career, then what is the best way for yourself as industrial design students to achieve industrial design? That would be the question that I would be wanting to know. So let's go ahead and just jump through. I hope it's all sounds good to you guys. Okay, so is industrial design dead? Let's go ahead and try to tackle this question. So to answer this question, it's actually very simple. If you continuously see companies coming out with products year after year, products that you personally want to design yourself, that should be enough to answer the question, is industrial design dead? If you ask me, every single year, companies come out with numerous amount of products, and you know, these products don't design themselves. Somebody has to do the hard work to design these products for them, and that's you. And so is industrial design dead? I definitely don't think it's dead. So then naturally that leads to, well, is industrial design a good career? And so if I were to ask each and every one of you, what does it mean to have a good career? I'm sure I'll receive a lot of different answers. It's a very subjective type of thing, right? And so I went ahead and I broke it down to these three factors. Okay, and I think this is probably the bare minimum of what you would consider to be a good career. Obviously, you should be able to find a job, or else, you know, what's the point? Make a healthy wage, and of course, enjoy your work. So let's go ahead and talk about find a job. So if you guys are anything like me, you have huge concerns on, even if you get really good at industrial design, even if you graduate and get that degree, are you able to land a job? And so I'm here to relieve your concern and say that it's not hard at all to land a job with an industrial design degree. It's not hard at all. However, I also got to say that that doesn't mean that you guys will be industrial designers. To actually land an industrial design job and to do industrial design tasks and to hold an industrial design title, every single year it's becoming harder and harder. But I'll touch a lot more upon that later in the presentation. But what I will say is that the skills that you do learn as an industrial designer is very applicable in many different industries. So some of the students that I've graduated with here at Cal State Long Beach, the ones that didn't become industrial designers ended up finding themselves in other fields such as product management, UX, UI design, graphics design, mechanical engineering, visual artists. There are some people that only do rendering. There's some people that only prototype projects, and there's some people that I've discovered that also run their own business. And so the skills that you learn in your classes are real world skills that are valuable in the marketplace. And so you'll be able to find some kind of a job with an industrial design degree and an industrial design skills. So are you able to make a healthy wage, right? I think naturally that is the logical question. It's okay, well, I'm able to find a job. Am I able to make a decent living? I think, again, this is also very subjective. If I were to ask you guys how much you want to make, some of you might say, you know, $100,000 a year, and other you guys might say, I want to make $1 million a year, right? So I'm going to try to answer this question by really just making myself an example. So just to share with you guys, I'm with an industrial design wage. Of course, I'm an industrial designer after 5 years. And I can tell you guys that I'm able to pay each and every one of my bills comfortably every month. I'm able to have enough money left over to be able to invest it, buy the things that I want to buy, go on some nice vacations from time to time. Not really with a limitation of money, but more of just how many vacation hours that I've racked up and how much I kind of have on my plate. I've been able to invest towards my early retirement goal, and so far it's on its way there. I'm able to I was at, you know, a lot of millennials nowadays, they talk about houses are so expensive, and how can anybody expect to buy a house, especially in California, right? Things are just like absolutely insane. And so after a lot of diligent saving, after 5 years, I was able to buy my own single family house here in Orange County, which is, you know, again, one of the craziest, most expensive places in all of America. And so with an industrial design wage, you can absolutely do it if you plan for it and if you're diligent with your money. And so as far as unhealthy wage goes, it's not like, you know, I'm not making $1 million a year or so, but you'll be able to achieve what I have just listed out if you want to become an industrial designer yourself. And I'm a far cry from James Dyson, who is also just also happens to be an industrial designer as well. If you guys don't know him, he is the founder, designer, creator of the Dyson vacuums. And he also is the richest industrial designer that I personally have found, with a net worth of over $7 billion. And so with an industrial design degree, you'll be able to find yourself somewhere between me and James Dyson. Okay, and last, enjoy your work. So I got to be honest with you guys, you know, it's incredibly exciting to land your first industrial design job and get your first industrial design paycheck. You know, I was so used to designing things for free at school. You know, I just did it for free, or I did a free internship and stuff like that. And to actually truly make money with the skills that you learn in your class was a very exciting thing for me. And I couldn't honestly believe that somebody was paying me to do it. And so after a while, though, it starts to become normal. It starts to become like a regular job after, I would say, about maybe 2 or 3 years. You kind of get used to it. You're used to seeing your products on the shelves, which is also a very exciting thing as well, to be able to see your very first, product that you've designed sitting on the shelves of some store, and just telling yourself, yeah, I designed that. That was like a vision that I always had for myself, and it came true a couple of times. And so everything starts to turn like a normal job. I wake up in the morning, put my glasses on, get ready, go to work, put in my 8 hours and go home. And so, it starts to just feel like a normal job. And so what I would say is that there's no other job, though, that I would pick other than industrial design. And I've had many opportunities to switch careers and do something different. And for some reason, I've always just seemed to gravitate back to industrial design. And I think there's one other job that I would consider switching to, and that's probably teaching and designing industrial designers. I think that would be the only thing that would take me away from industrial design. And so, and also I think that I would think that a lot of professionals here would agree with me that a lot of what makes a job enjoyable is really, it's not really the job itself, but it's a lot about the mission that your company is striving for, what your company is all about, and also the people that you work with closely on a day-to-day basis. The quality of those people will truly dictate if that job is enjoyable to you or just absolute nightmare. And so if you can find a good job with good people, then I think that your whole experience of becoming an industrial designer will be positive. So if that all sounds good to you guys still, I'm not here to really like scare anybody away, but I'm here to give you the real, at least my experience on what I've kind of experienced as an industrial designer for the past 5 years. And so far, like I said, I'm still loving it. And I hope that after sharing this with you guys are even more wanting to become industrial designers yourself. And so that leads us on to this question here, which is, okay, Jimmy, all of that sounds good to me. So how do I actually become an industrial designer? Is probably the natural question if I were you guys. And so earlier I mentioned that actually becoming an industrial designer is getting harder and harder every year. And so if you were to break down like how many students are in each class, like graduating students, let's just say it's like anywhere from 20 to 40 students per class, right? So that's 20 to 40 other students that you yourself are competing with. You're competing with your other classmates when it comes to after you graduate and landing a job and finding a job and competing with them to be able to stand out. And so you're competing with them. Once you graduate, though, I mean, you're competing with essentially every industrial designer that's in your area that has graduated before you. And also now with this whole environment of work from home, where the pool of competition just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And there's a lot of industrial design jobs out there, but there's only few of them that are actually very good. And so the idea is that you want to be the best industrial designer you could possibly be to help you set yourself up to be able, whenever the opportunity comes, you will be in the right position to inherit that opportunity yourself. And so the idea is, what are the things that you actually need to do to be the best industrial designer you could possibly be? And so I came up with these things here. It's called the 5 principles to be a successful industrial designer. So it's 5 things that I've kind of accumulated over the years of trying to just be the best industrial designer that I could possibly be. And so I hope that you guys can really, if you haven't really listened much up until this point, I really hope that you guys pay attention here. And I really believe if you absorb all of this in now, it's going to help you along the way. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into it. Number 1 is technical skills. This is simply know how to get the job done, okay? So this is not really like being really good at technical skills. What I really want to have you guys understand is grow an appreciation for trying to accumulate technical skills. Understand that there are things that you need to do to be able to accumulate these technical skills. And it really doesn't have to do with anything that's problem solving. It doesn't have to do with creativity or anything like that, or trying to be a good drawer. This is really just knowing what buttons to press when you've launched up SolidWorks, knowing who to go to, what are reliable sources. And so I went ahead and I listed some of the most critical skills that any industrial designer has to learn, right? Of course, it's research. Research can be user research, competitor research, technological research. It can be ideation, so a lot of exploration, creating mock-ups, creating sketches to discover what your design can possibly be. It's 2D work, so graphics, Photoshop renders. It could be 3D, which is 3D modeling, SolidWorks, Rhino, Fusion 360, 3D printing, and also rendering. So creating your beautiful renders in Keyshot or whatever render program that you prefer. So these are the main 5 categories, obviously, that you as industrial designers need to master. And the only way to really master all these 5 is to really be good at this list right here. So of course, with any kind of task that you're trying to achieve, I believe that these items here always try to help you master the things that you need to do to achieve those tasks and get that job done, okay? And it's really just knowing what some of the reliable sources are. So if you need to gather some type of information, know what websites to go to, what books to read, and maybe even what people to talk to in order to really gather your information. Understand the reliable sources, tools. Know with any type of task that's assigned to you, know how to use the proper tools to get the job done, whether it's digital programs or it's some physical tool in the shop. And so just understanding, okay, I need to use the right tool for the right task is an important thing. So just be aware of that. Locations of things, know how to find things, where to find them, whether it's digital or physical. Maybe there's files that you need to access and they live on some sort of database, or somebody is a gateholder of this database and you need to find them. And so understanding where to find things and remembering where to find things is always very important. Rules and limitations. So everything that you do, there's always going to be some type of a rule, whether it's man-made or it's just a natural physical rule that can't be broken, or it's just limitations that you have to work within, like earlier when I mentioned patents. So understanding them is always a good thing. You don't if it's man-made, you don't always have to abide by the rules, but I think it's always important to understand the rules first and then understand what the proper way to break the rules. But it's always good to be aware. Techniques, anything that you try to achieve, there's always going to be best practices and or shortcuts. Shortcuts, sometimes they help you, such as computer shortcuts in a program, having the ability to really memorize these things, especially if you've recognized that they will help you with the things that you need to achieve, then it's always going to be a good thing to help you along the way, and just keep your eye out on it. Safety, I think that's self-explanatory, whether it's safety for you or for somebody else. And of course, everything has its flow, it has its processes. You got to take baby steps, do something one at a time in order to finally get to the goal that you want. And so what I've discovered is that these things have always helped me out when trying to figure out something, learn something, and just accomplish something, because as an industrial designer, you're going to have to do a lot of learning. You're going to have to do a lot of things that you probably never learned in school. And so if you know how to find that information and do it, you're always going to know how to get the job done. Okay. Okay, moving on. Number 2 is mechanical engineering. So I think industrial designers are most like mechanical engineers. We use the same programs. We kind of almost do the same thing. But what I've discovered is that an industrial designer is the one that gets to do the fun parts when creating a product. And so all mechanical engineer, what I really mean by this is every product has its function. It has to serve some type of function or value to the user, right? And so as you're designing your products, of course, you're thinking about how it looks, but eventually you're going to have to think about how it's going to be, how it's going to work. You know, so what mechanical mechanisms are you applying to this thing? What articulation type of things or mechanical mechanisms or whatever that allows functionality for your product. This is kind of like 254, 280 kind of stuff. Okay. How the product is made is an important thing. And as a design student, you really don't need to know too much, but I think it's always important to have a general gist of how it's made. So just have a rough idea. Maybe it's injection molded, maybe it's stamped, you know, extruded, maybe it's 3D printed, you know, but just have a rough idea of how you think the products that you're designing is made. Okay. And maybe also start thinking about what materials it's made of. So I remember when I was going to school, I always put a lot of my effort into making sure that the design looked good and that it seemed realistic and that that the renderings turned out great. But truly just have a specific focus on really defining, if you're going to make something leather, start thinking about maybe what color the leather is and really define it. Maybe show a little color swatch or a Pantone. If it has some type of a texture, the plastics that you're using has some type of special texture on it. You could have a reference to a product that you really like, and then just show an image right next to it and just say it's going to have some kind of a texture like this. Okay, and what I'm trying to get across is that it's really starting to define your designs rather than just being like, hey, this is the idea and this is the solution. It's like, no, it's like, here, this is how it's made, this is how it works, this is the material. And so it's really just starting to get very specific on your design decisions, okay? And you can get even deeper. You can start thinking about how it's assembled. What kind of screws does it use, or how it comes together? Maybe it's clips or some kind of a slider or something like that. And of course, you can get really nerdy and just start thinking about how much something like this is going to cost by getting quotes and whatnot. But I don't think you guys as students really need to think about that unless you're truly gonna your goals are to make and produce and manufacture the products that you're going to be designing. But just to share with you guys, when you are actually designing real products, these are a lot of the things that I spend my time figuring out is how is my product that I've designed going to work in the real world. Okay, visual design, number 3. And of course, just to remind you guys, these are the 5 principles to be a successful industrial designer, okay? So number 3 is visual design. So a combination of number 1, which is your technical skills, and of course, your mechanical skills, combined with your visual skills, that is really what makes an industrial designer unique. Mechanical engineers, they're just thinking, how do we make this product work? Technical people, they're just thinking, how do we get this job done? And so along with that, adding your visual design skills, this is really starting to think about the user and think about how this product is going to look in the real world. And of course, visual design doesn't necessarily have to only fall upon the physical appearance of the product that you're designing. It could also be when you're pitching your idea, the presentation and your graphics also look great. visual design goes further than just the design of your products. How does your renders look? Do they look impactful? Did you pick the correct angles to show your idea and to really sell your idea to be able to push it and have that idea be selected and excite any stakeholders? Okay, so visual and of course, craftsmanship is also an important one. So that trickles into presentation and graphics as well. And everything is just make sure that your visual design is impactful and it's on point. When you look at it, do you like it? And what I've discovered, having nice design is very subjective. Some people will like it, some people won't. But what I've discovered is that if you've designed something and you've looked at it for hours at a time, and you get feelings of like, wow, that's a pretty sweet design. A lot of the times what I found is that other people also think the same as well. Okay, and this is not last actually. Number 4 is empathy. Okay, empathy is always a little bit of a weird one, but I think it makes a lot of sense when you think about it as you're putting yourself in their shoes. Okay, and so who is there? I think a lot of us, we tend to think, okay, we got to think about the user, because at the end of the day, this is going to be the user is going to be using the products that we design. We got to figure out their pain points. We got to go through this whole life scenario with them and analyze and study them. But in the real world, there's a lot of actually things that you got to consider, other perspectives. So most of the times, if you're working for a brand, you got to think about, what does that brand try to achieve? What are they going for? What would they do? Who are the other stakeholders? Are they your bosses, product managers, investors? You got to think about them. That will also dictate your design. Of course, again, like I said, the user as a student, that's the one that you gravitate to and think about the most. But I think also as a student, another stakeholder for you guys is your professor or any other professional industrial designer that's a guest that's giving you a critique, and so when you're designing your products, it's a lot of the times it's your own decision that you're making yourself and you think it's cool. But, as a student, it's also good to also consider the opinion of your teacher, because in the real world, it's not always going to be your decisions. You're going to have to take a lot of feedback among a lot of different people. And this could either be your bosses, like I said, or it could be your fellow designers that you work with closely. They're going to give you opinions. Maybe you'll agree with it, maybe you won't. And you kind of have to work together and figure out a plan to be able to design something great that achieves all of these and takes everybody's opinions into account. It's kind of like a balancing act. And of course, if your design is going to be made, sometimes you might make the user happy, you might make the stakeholders happy, you might make the brand happy, but when it comes to actually manufacturing this thing, sometimes the manufacturer will be like, no, we can't do that, or 2, it's going to cost way too much. And so you got to also consider the perspective of the manufacturer as well. And so it's quite a big balancing act to really try to create a design that takes into account all of these aspects here. And so I call that empathy. And it's really just to understand other people and understand their motives, and you being the designer figuring out a plan and a design to be able to achieve and create a successful product. Okay, and last, so this one's last. This is being professional, guys. So it doesn't matter if you're the best industrial designer in the whole world if you don't show up to the job, right? And so it's always important to be professional. In the real world, you got to deal with people, you got to deal with your bosses, and so and you want to create a good environment. And so you obviously want to be professional. You want to be punctual. You want to be able to meet deadlines and do the things that you said you were going to do and do the things that you're responsible for. Of course, take care of your personal appearance. You know, make sure you're not showing up on the job like a slob. Make sure your hair is good, you dress well, and you're communicative. Make sure to talk. You know, don't just be this quiet person that doesn't really say much, because nobody will really know what's going on with you. And so it's always important to communicate, of course. Be proactive. Proactive is always one that has helped me out a lot. Proactive meaning that you're not just sitting around waiting for somebody to tell you to do something. You're actually observing, sitting back, seeing how things are run, seeing how you can help people with the skills that you have, taking initiatives on things that could really benefit the company. And then, of course, another thing that has really helped me out is under promise and over deliver. And so a lot of what being professional is really just being reliable. You know, I've met a lot of very talented industrial designers in my day, but really their Achilles heel was that they just weren't reliable. You couldn't really depend on them to show up on time, or if you're going to tell them to do a task, you know that they're going to get it done. And so sometimes the designers that might not be as talented but are reliable, sometimes they're the ones who get the job over the ones that are really talented. So if you go ahead and see that person that's in your class that's super talented and you want a one-up on them, just make sure you're the most reliable person and that you're doing what you need done. Okay, and of course, I recommend being a pro at all of these. So make sure to understand your technical skills, know what to do to gain your technical skills and get the job done. Know how to design your product and make sure that they work, mechanical engineering. Make sure that your designs are visually impactful, that they appeal to the target audience that you're aiming for. Of course, empathy, understand all the stakeholders, all the things that are involved when it comes to designing a product, and putting yourself into their shoes and truly just really taking into account what they're looking for, as well as your own as well. And also being professional and reliable. And so these are truly the 5 skills, guys, that makes a successful industrial designer. And so what I would recommend is for your portfolios. So the thing that you're going to be putting together to show employers to be able to land a job, you can really structure your portfolio in almost any way that you want. But it's really important to show off these skills right here, okay? Somehow show off your technical skills. Think about it, use your critical thinking to figure out how you can show off your critical skills. Show that you understand how to design products to where that they work. Obviously, create products that look great. Have empathy in mind. So a lot of the times for students, it's showing that you've done research on the user. And of course, be professional. So when you show up for that interview, because they're so impressed with your portfolio, you're looking good, dressed well, you're communicative, all you're doing there is you're setting yourself up the best you possibly can to land that job. And I can guarantee you'll beat most industrial designers that aren't doing all of these 5 things. Okay, that is it, guys. That concludes my presentation. So hope you guys enjoyed, and we can open it up to questions.
All right, thank you, Jimmy. Very much appreciate all these really great tips from a recently seasoned and solid industrial designer that has been out there for 5 years, and kind of giving us all both some reminders as well as insight into how you have structured yourself to be both successful as well as continuing to enjoy the career you've chosen. So thank you. Yes, once again, if you guys want to give a round of applause here, take off your microphone before we have some Q&A going on. So one of the things that Jimmy, I'd like to point out is that a lot of these components of what you talked about tonight are very transferable to the other design disciplines. Although a lot of what you mentioned was very specific to industrial design, the content and how you approach all of this is easily transferable. And so I appreciate the specificity as to how you structure this for yourself. We have actually a bunch of really good questions I'm going to get to. Our first one, I'm going to kind of put these together a bit, is some of the students want to know, how many hours do you work a week, and do you have a work-life balance?
For sure. I work at minimum 40 hours. Is it 40? Yeah, 40 hours a week, which is typically the typical 8 hours a day. There are times though where I have to jump on a call late at night, because as an industrial designer, we're dealing with people from Far East, so Taiwan, Singapore, China. Those are the people that are specialized in manufacturing and making products. And so sometimes you just kind of have to spend a little time during your dinner time to have conversations with them to make sure that things are going. And so typically those take about 30 minutes to an hour or so. And but otherwise, I feel like I have a great work balance. I'm not like crazy stressed out. And I think a lot of that has to do with working at a larger company. Meaning that when you work at a larger company, there's a lot of people that specialize and are very good at what they do. And so you almost stick in your own lane and you do what you do that you're designated to do. And then once that's done, it moves on to the next person. When you work at a smaller company, typically you have to put on a lot more hats, from what I've discovered. And so there's a lot more on your shoulders, and so I found myself being a little bit more stressed out when I did work at smaller companies in comparison to working at a larger company.
Yeah, I think that's something to really learn about yourself, and getting the opportunity to test out through interning the different types of companies, knowing that. And I think that kind of clues into some of your professionalism talk, is knowing yourself and knowing who your audience is that professionalism to one organization may be very different culturally than professionalism to a let's say a small consultancy. And so getting to know who that market is, I think, is, and how you fit, because you're a stakeholder at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what is your favorite way to present a product to a prospective client? Is it the renderings, the modeling, or digital? What do you get into?
Yeah. So the first thing I always like to do is to have a verbal conversation with them as far as what I am going to do, and kind of just be on the same mindset and goal path. I'm going to say, so if these are the things you want me to do, I think this is the solution that we should go for. It seems logical, so I'm going to try that. I'll probably try another thing as well. What do you think about it? And they'll most likely either say, cool, that sounds good, or also give me another idea we could potentially go. And so I think right away that sets the stage of what they expect from me. And then so I go ahead and I do my thing, the industrial design thing, sit in front of a computer and you grind away. What I've done my first couple of years is, and what I think a lot of industrial designers tend to do is they wait for that big grand reveal, like like, oh yeah, it's gonna be, you know, next month, and I'm gonna present this whole thing, and I'm not gonna show them anything before that. And even though that's, you know, for some reason, I feel like industrial designers, we just gravitate to that mindset. But what I've discovered is what makes things go a lot smoother is if you help them and you show updates throughout the way. And so sometimes I will just kind of just send over maybe some competitor samples and being in some images and being like, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And then I'll send over maybe some sketches, and then being like, hey, how does this look to you? I'm going to try maybe these 3 very rough shapes. And then that leads into, okay, maybe I'm going to do some Photoshop renders, very quick and dirty, but they'll look nice. And then see what they think from there. And you kind of just move through it slowly. And that helps really reduce the friction, as far as like, if you wait for the grand reveal, you show these final looking pretty present, you know, renders, and it looks so finished, and it doesn't really set up a good foundation, because they think, well, is the design locked in now? You know, like I still have a lot of feedback I want to give you, and you've done so much work to get it to that point. You kind of like resistant on changing anything. And so that's something that I've took me a long time to learn, but personally, that's what I've discovered is if you can help share as many updates as you can, and show your thought process, baby steps along the way, things just tend to go a lot smoother. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, I think that's a not only a good answer to the question, but it's actually a smart approach to not get yourself too far down a road without any way back. Okay, a kind of a fun question is, how'd you get the job on TV? How'd you get it?
I think we got to give a lot of credit to David Tubner. Dave Tubner, he sent out a random, I don't even know how he got it, but he sent out to everybody that there's this contest about designing golf drivers. And surprisingly, another person that I was going to class with, her name is Shayla, and she asked me, hey, Jimmy, do you want to do this thing? And I said, I don't know, maybe. And then I had a couple other buddies, Patrick, Brian, and Matt, and we all kind of created this little team, and none of us golfed at all. But we decided, you know, what the heck, let's just like do it. And so we submitted an application, we recorded ourselves, and we didn't hear back for months. And you know, you kind of just forget about it and you move on. And then one day they sent us an email saying, you guys were selected and you guys get to be on the show and compete for $500,000 designing a golf driver. And so that was season 1 for me, was being with my team and designing the golf driver that we did. And then for how I got onto season 2 is they decided to have the second season. They reached out to all of us to see if we wanted to do it again. And only 3 of us, the team that I mentioned to you, only 3 of us were able to do it. And then for some reason or another, one of them dropped out. And then since that one dropped out, the other one dropped out. And that only left me. And so I was sitting there thinking, you know, do I want to go through it on my own now? You know, it's a very stressful situation where you have to design a product that you're not very, you don't have any expertise on. You're going on TV show, you're flying out to places. And so it's a very scary thing. And I was so comfortable doing it with my classmates, and having them drop out, it was a big decision for me to wanting to continue. And I said, what the heck, might as well do it. And we'll see what happens. And so that's how I was able to compete on season 2 of Driver versus Driver. I'm very happy I did.
Very cool. Yeah, I think those stories of serendipity are kind of an interesting bump in the road in a designer's career a lot of times. would you recommend ID students get as many internships as they can? How do you recommend they go about doing that?
Mhm. So when I was going to school, I remember thinking I probably should get internships too. And this is like a junior year, so 2 more years until we graduated. And I didn't know how to get an internship. So the first thing I did was I reached out to Matthias and I asked him, hey, can I work in your shop as an intern and you don't have to pay me? So that I can have it on my resume and gain some experience. And so he said, yeah. So I showed up to his shop once a week and we worked on some of the projects he was working on. And so that was my very first internship. My second internship was at this other company. It's called Neil Fay. It was a company that was running out of my hometown, which is Santa Barbara. They did like a lot of manufacturing and anodize. They specialized in anodizing aluminum. I asked for a tour and I showed up there. I just showed up with my boss at the time. He was trying to help me get it. Asked for a tour. So the guy walked us around. And then at the very end of it, I asked him, I'm an industrial design student. I'm trying to get an internship. This place that you showed me looks very interesting. And I hope, hope if you have any opportunity, I'll be able to get an internship here. And so I did that for only a couple of weeks and I really didn't like the place and I ended up dropping out. But that's what I would say is a very good way to get an internship is to 1, reach out, 2, ask for a tour, 3, meet them in person, 4, explain your situation, and then 5, ask them if you could be an intern. There's opinions on getting paid or not. If you're desperate and if you just really want to learn and get an internship, just do it for free, you know, and but sometimes they will pay you. And I recommend doing those ones because it's always good to be paid a little bit on what you do for them. And but also it's okay not to get paid, I think, just to gain that experience and understand what it really like to work at a company.
All right. Without knowing anything about certain products, how do you go about learning them in order to design for them? So what is your research process now as a professional?
Mhm. So how a project generally starts with where I work is everything starts with a business plan. So first we tackle what sector we want to focus on. So we'll see what products sell well within a sector at what price, because price always dictates what pretty much a user will buy or not. So like say, for example, a computer mouse, like would you buy a $500 computer mouse or would you buy a $70 computer mouse or would you buy a $200 computer mouse? Most likely, most people will buy that $70 computer mouse over the $500 one, right? So the idea is to really target what price point do most people buy it at, okay? So you're kind of setting yourself up when it comes to success in selling a product. The second thing is, okay, well, if we are going to create a $70 mice, what other $70 mice are there out there in the market at the moment? And you'll probably find a handful of mice that are $70, right? And as you line them all up, you'll discover they all kind of offer similar features. Maybe some have a certain sensor in it. Maybe some have RGB. Maybe some have a special kind of button that does something. You know, you'll find something. Maybe some are wireless, some are wirelessly charged. So you end up building this feature list with this price range that has been targeted. And then after that, you have the feature list. So the idea now is to design the thing. And so how do you design it to accomplish all the feature list and make it better than all the other ones that you've referenced? And so you go through the process of understanding trends, what's hot, what looks good, materials, forms, shapes. You kind of just have a understanding of that thing, keep updated, you know, go on Behance and study other companies, and see certain trends that you kind of see trickle throughout the industry. You'll notice them once you start working. And then you kind of just apply it, you make it your own, you apply it to your brand, you apply that empathy, you understand what's possible within your company, and you do the best that you can to develop that product. And that's usually the process that I take.
Excellent. Have you noticed typically, do the companies that you've worked with value more your ability to draw on pen and paper, or are you seeing more digital or a balance? What have you seen out there?
Yeah. So I would say that drawing is important for yourself. When it's like a rough draft, you're never going to show anybody your rough draft. Say if you were to like write an essay or something like that, you're only going to submit like the final thing, right? You're not going to be like, you know, or maybe you'll show like parts of the rough draft where it's actually coherent, you know. And so so sketching is always good, but usually it's about you trying to figure out your own personal thoughts is what I'm trying to get at. What I found to be the most important skills as far as, you know, sketching or rendering or stuff is typically 3D modeling. This is something that I was planning on saying, but I didn't say it earlier. But 3D modeling, I think, is what makes a modern industrial designer. A lot of industrial designers that have graduated maybe 15 years ago don't know how to use a 3D modeling program, don't know how to use SolidWorks. It just wasn't very common during the time that they were going to school. And so most of them are like managers and like creative directors and stuff that are telling the younger generation what to do. But as far as like an industrial design student and being a modern industrial designer that will be graduating, you must know a 3D program. And the reason being is that any design is really defined by a 3D model. You know, like when you guys are creating your 3D models in SolidWorks, you're adding dimension to it, you're adding angles to it, you're adding you're making sure that that surface or that form or that shape is exactly what it needs to be. And when you rotate it around, it stays exactly how you wanted it to be. Whereas a sketch, you might draw it and it might look cool, but then you'll draw it again and it might look a little bit different. And it might look a little bit different if you draw at a different angle. You know, it might look very close, but it also will be different. Proportions might not be the same. You can't dimension, you know, you can't make sure that that's exactly 5 inches, you know, and then modify it later in a sketch. And so at the end of the day, like I told you guys earlier, when you create your designs, eventually you're going to have to really define your design. What is that surface? What is the size of it going to be? And it has to be it has to be something at first in order to give you a reference point to modify it later. And you can really only do that with a 3D model. In 3D models, it trickles into a lot of things, such as now you can 3D print it and you can verify how it is in your hands. You can create renders off of it. So there's, and then you could obviously send it to the manufacturer to get it created. And so a 3D model is a very important skill, along with your render skills. So what's important about rendering is really applying your CMF. So CMF means, it's an acronym for color, material, and finish. So so in order to define the CMF, it's pretty much in a render. So you'll render it and then you'll draw a little call out arrow and say, this is plastic, it's black, and it has a rough texture. And then this is red and glossy, and it's made of anodized aluminum, you know. So you're really defining each and every part, and a rendering helps with that along with your CMF callouts. And so 3D model and renderings, what I found is the most important thing, and asset and deliverable that you will be providing.
All right, so I think we have a this is a soft ask here is, have you ever had somebody shadow you in your work as an industrial designer?
Have I had somebody shadow me? Um, so I don't necessarily see it as shadowing, but I could say the closest thing is one of my students that I taught when I was teaching junior studio in 2020. He was an incredibly talented student, great drawer, great 3D modeler, great renderer. And there were a couple of students that also were equally, if not slightly better than him. But of course, he was also extremely professional. I knew I could rely on him 100%. With a combination of his design skills, his rendering, and his reliability, I knew he was the perfect candidate to really push in order to fill a new position that we were trying to seek at the time, which is intern industrial designer. And so I threw his name into the list, and we were able to get him. And now he's a full-time hire with us. And so I try to just show him the ropes and teach him how it's kind of like to design a product in a company as much as I can. And so that's the closest thing I say I would, as far as somebody shadowing me.
Very good, very good. Okay, so a lot of consumer electronics particularly have similar visuals and have cycles through trends. What are your thoughts on trend design in consumer electronics, and do you try to actively break these cycles through your process, or how do you work with these trends?
Yeah, so trends is always an interesting one. It's like you see the trend and you could choose to either implement it or not. And even if you choose to implement it or not, sometimes it's not feasible when it comes to the mechanical engineers. Every company has their limitations. And so like Apple can do things that Sony can't do, or Microsoft can do things that Apple can't do. It's just how the company is structured, the abilities of the company, the bandwidth of the company, and so on. And so sometimes when I try to implement a trend, sometimes it runs into those kind of barriers. And over time, after designing so many products, I've kind of learned what I can and what I can't do. And so a lot of the times what I find I do is that I do always study what design trends are out there, of course, and I try to apply them in a way that I know is possible with my company. And then of course I always try to just apply my design eye. So I have ideas all the time about what I think it should be, and I do it. And that's usually how I operate when it comes to like coming up with my designs and stuff.
Great, great. Where do you see a crossover between ID and UX, particularly in your industry?
Okay, so I think to answer that question, it's very important to define what UX is. So I think a lot of people, what they think it is it's like a digital stuff, right? It's like designing apps and understanding flows of what the user experiences as they jump from one page to the next, click on certain buttons. But at the end of the day, what UX really means is user experience. And that could come in the form of apps, like I said, but it could also come in the form of just an activity in a way, what they go through, the first thing that they see and experience, and the interpretations that they kind of have. And so I think so that's what UX is from what I've kind of accumulated over my years of working. And so how industrial designers fall into that is it falls within that empathy section that I told you guys about just understanding the user and go and kind of intuitively understanding what they would go through in order to implement it into your own physical design. But I think like people that do UX, like they take it very seriously because that's the only thing that they do, you know, like they do a lot of flow charts and they break it down and they're creating all of these crazy things. They're running focus groups and stuff like that. And so what they do is like, it's like kind of like falls within the empathy thing that I told you guys about, but UX is like, you know, it's all about figuring out the user experience and understanding it and breaking it down. And they don't provide 3D models and renderings like we do. So that's kind of the differentiation that I've picked up with the two.
Great, yeah. There's potentials for lots of crossovers at the very foundation of it, and then they go off in different avenues to specialize.
Mm-hmm.
Do you experience or how do you deal with designer's block?
Designers what?
Block. So do you ever feel like you get stuck doing the same thing over and over, or just can't get through that into a new idea? What is your process to kind of break that?
You know, it's funny.
Or do you even experience it? Are you that prolific?
Yeah, I usually don't. And I think that it's this. It's because when you're a student, you are given such a broad thing. You're like, okay, pick a project, design something, and you're like, crap, what do I design, right? And then, okay, let's say I design a water bottle, right? And then you pick a water bottle, and then you're like, okay, well, you're like, okay, well, what does this water bottle need? Now you have to come up with that. And so I think as a student, you have to go through all of these like steps to define these things to get to your final design. And as a professional, you're almost given those things. Your boss is going to come to you and tell you, Jimmy, I need this headphone made. It's going to be for kids. It's going to be $30, and it's going to have these features. It's going to be wired. And so when I have all of these constraints and these things that I know I need to achieve, it just my goal is to come up with a design that achieves all those things, that looks great and it works well. And so when that's your starting point, you don't really run too much into designer's block, especially if you also have a process going. When you're a student, I think the best advice I could give is when you do end up picking these projects that you have to do in class, it's good to start off with what product you're going to design and then figure out who's it going to be for. Because like say a water bottle, it could be for a kid, or it could be for a hiker, it could be for a camper, it could be for an office worker. And a lot of what it's for is going to dictate what it's going to be, how it's going to look, the features that it's going to be in it. And once you start defining those things, it really helps you with coming up with a physical design and a solution.
So creating constraints for yourself is really much more important than just opening the doors wide open.
Correct. Yeah.
I think we kind of covered what software you typically use. Are there any softwares that maybe aren't on everybody's radar that you've been that you've utilized in the past through your career?
Honestly, guys, I always keep it like super simple, stupid. Like I'm like all the programs that they teach you at Cal State Long Beach, I'm still using it today. Always on Keyshy, always in SolidWorks. I use a lot of Photoshop. I feel like you have to pick one. It's either like you're really pro at Photoshop, or you're really pro at Illustrator, or you're really pro at InDesign, but be good at one of those, you know. And one thing that I actually use that they don't really teach you in school is PowerPoint. It's kind of weird. I think students, we all use like PDF, right? And we're creating it in Photoshop and Illustrator, but in the real world, like business people, which you're going to be presenting to and sharing, and people are taking your presentation and doing stuff to it. It's really difficult to manipulate a PDF and like move things around. So what I've had to get really good at is create some nice presentations in PowerPoint, because that's like the standard preferred program that they all choose. And you kind of have to fall within that mold as well.
Yeah, I think knowing your industry well and what those standards are definitely key. I know we've had some guest lecturers that their entire process is done in Illustrator, and then it goes overseas. People make patterns, and that's it.
Yeah,
and that's a completely different process than one that you would be going through for your daily work. What would you say your biggest challenge as a student was, and how did you overcome it? I know you covered a bit about this through your presentation, but what really kind of do you feel might have held you back as a student?
What held me back as a student? I don't know. It's difficult for me to answer that question because like I don't know, that I always saw what I was doing as I just need to learn as much as I can and be the best that I could possibly be. And that was like the overarching broadest goals that I had. So going to school, I feel like a lot of students, they say like, well, they didn't teach us this or they didn't teach us that. And you know, if you're empathetic to the professors, you know, sometimes the professors, you know, they have their curriculum that they need to teach you, and you can't always learn everything in school, and you have to be proactive and learn some of the things that you want to learn on your own. And so I always saw school as something that contributed to my education, along with me looking into other things that I also wanted to learn on YouTube, you know, on the internet, which you can learn a lot. And that's kind of how I always thought about it. So as far as being a student, I never really thought there was something that was holding me back. It was more of just what I had to do.
As industrial designers, that in a studio, that organization like what you're working in, is it collaborative? Are you relied on solely for your work? Who do you work with in your job?
Yeah, my job is extremely collaborative, and it wasn't always that way. But I think over time we kind of learned that that's kind of the best way to operate. And so we do our best to share it among our team of industrial designers and gather their opinions. I feel like you don't really do that as a student because you're never making it yourself, you know, like it's always just the furthest you're gonna take it is a prototype. But when you really need to like when you're signing your name off saying this is the design that we're going to be making hundreds of thousands of, like, it's a lot of pressure. And so sometimes you don't want to just have that be your own decision. You want to see what this person thinks, what that designer thinks, maybe even a non-designer, what they think of it, and really gather their opinions to be like, oh yeah, I never thought of that at all. And so and then there's opinions that you don't want to take either, that's for sure. And so but it's always good to gather these opinions, hear the feedback, hear what other people say. And I think a lot of the times that really helps dictate your design. And there's sometimes where I've designed something where I thought it was super cool, and then we went off on a different direction, and that actually turned out to be the better choice too. So it's always important to be very collaborative and listen and hear what other people have to say. Because you never really know where it's going to take you, and if it makes sense, then sometimes it's good to just run with it, you know. And so I work with my other designers. We also work with PMs. They're the product managers. So they're the ones that are really focused on the numbers that I told you guys about. So like, you know, if you're targeting a $70 mice, what are the other competitors? What are the feature set to those competitors? They're really like doing research on that front. So I interface a lot with them. I interface a lot with our designers in Taiwan. And they're the ones that interface a lot with the manufacturer. So I take their input to understand what's possible and what's not.
So on the collaborative side, there's a lot of positives, but have you had issues with somebody either plagiarizing or copying your work or that sort of thing, either at one of your firms or any of the other jobs that you've had?
About copying, that's not even a consideration of mine. It's really just, if they copy, they copy. You can't really help it, right? I mean, you're gonna do the best that you're gonna do, and if somebody chooses to copy it, then they choose to copy it, and hopefully it works out good for them. It worked out good for me, so that's probably why they're doing it. And so that's kind of how I think of it as. Yeah, so I don't really think too negatively when somebody copies my work, and it hasn't ever really been a problem at all from what I've experienced. And like and also I gotta say is that design is a copycat industry, like something to just be completely aware of. If, you know, like everybody is copying Apple, and Apple is copying other people, but doing it their own way. And so it's just about copying and changing and doing it the way that you would do it.
I think if you're relying on just that one design and that's what's being copied, then you may not have a long career in it. You're more of an inventor in that sense. Okay, sort of an interesting part on this. Have you ever dealt with imposter syndrome? You felt like, oh man, am I really meant to do this? Am I doing this?
Not necessarily too much at like when I'm an employee at a job. I'm just doing what I think needs to be done, is how I see it. But when I was showing you guys earlier, when I was doing like the Biolase projects with the dentist stuff, that was my first time like landing a contract, working with a decently sized company, and creating a pitch, and a whole process, and charging each and every throughout that whole process. Like, you know, I felt like I don't know, I felt like that was like a little bit out of my wheelhouse, but I faked it till I made it, and it worked out, and I made a good amount of money, and nobody said anything, you know, because I knew at the end of the day, I knew what they wanted, and they just wanted a good design that works well and looks good and achieves all the features that they gave me that wants to be done. So I knew at the end of the day, that's what they wanted. So I knew I could provide that for them. But with all this other stuff, like creating, you know, like a business plan, and like, you know, all the kind of contracts and stuff, like I just, yeah, I felt like an imposter doing all that kind of stuff.
I think that's something that we don't always get the opportunity to be fully immersed in. We get a lot of training as designers and doing that, so you can rely on that skill, but not always on the business side of how you make that skill set pay for itself or protect yourself in some ways.
Yeah.
Okay, you had mentioned about patents regarding the USBs and SSDs. Are there other notable limitations you've encountered, and how do you work around those typically? What's your process to look at patents?
Yeah. Like when you're designing products for the real world, there's like so many limitations. So I mentioned some of them, just like manufacturing limitations, how good your mechanical engineers are is a big limitation. You might have an idea and they're like, we don't know how to do it. And you're like, why not? Like figure it out. There's patent limitations. So Kingston, they have a legal team, and we kind of they advise us and be like, there's these things that we can and cannot do. So we try to avoid them in order to not get sued. What other limit? Budget, I think, is the biggest limitation of them all. It's like, you want to do this and you want to do that, but you can't afford it. Like you have to meet these build of material costs, BOM costs, and so you have to remove this feature that you wanted in there, or you have to not make it metal and it has to be plastic, and just kind of stuff like that in order to make sense. The design that you're producing will be profitable. And so that I think money and cost is definitely the limitation when it comes to your designs.
Right. Okay, so we talked a lot about the positives. Is there anything that you don't like or that you dislike about industrial design as a career?
Let's see. What I don't like. Okay, so I think when you're a student and you're going out there and you land your job, you're kind of almost doing what you are told to do in a way. Somebody will tell you to do something, you do it. Eventually, it gets to the point where you've created enough projects and you've built this internal expertise and you've learned a lot of things as you designed all these things. And then and so there's like this breakthrough that you have to get through of like showing the person that has been telling you to do all these things to having competence of being like, no, we cannot do that. These are the reasons why, because we've already went through it with this project. And so I think there's a lot of internal battles with you and the other person that goes through when you're eventually going through that, when you're truly flowering as an industrial designer, and you kind of know what should happen, and then there's other people that are telling you what is going to happen, and then it's up to you to kind of discover how you go about that situation. And sometimes I just give in and I'm just like, okay, well, I'm just going to do what you told me to do, because one, I'm picking my battles, and then two, if you make the decision, that's on you, and it makes my job easier. And so and then there's times where it's worth fighting for, and I think I'm not that type of person that likes to fight with other people, or like to say no and be like, no, that's not a good idea. But and then sometimes you give in, and you think back and you're like, crap, I wish I did not give in, And so so those are the kind of things that I kind of really don't like about industrial design. So I just kind of like my thing about industrial design is I really just like sitting down and doing work and creating awesome things, and being like, yeah, that thing is freaking sweet, like that's what I really like about it. And so the business aspect of it, not so much. Yeah, not so much.
So kind of dovetailing onto that, I'm going to combine a couple of questions here and say, how would you say your tastes have changed over the 5 years when it comes to both design aesthetic and that sort of thing? And have you designed something that you weren't satisfied with how it turned out? So both the evolution of your taste and then seeing something that you're just like, that didn't work.
Yeah. I've designed, a lot of that happens where I design something, and I look back and I'm like, man, like that was a bad design. A lot of that happens in school. I think when you get out into the real world, and like I said, you gather so many opinions, and you're of course following orders, and so somebody will tell you like, that doesn't look good, so do it again, and you do it again, and Hopefully those people have a lot of experience themselves. And so a lot of the times what I've discovered is that there are things that I don't really look back and I'm like, man, that looks bad. There's probably better decisions I could have made, like mechanically speaking and stuff. But as far as aesthetic, not too much. And luckily it's due to a lot of my team guiding it to where it should be, and those that had more experience than me. Yeah.
Networking advice. How do you recommend students reach out? You happen to go in and just walk in and ask for a tour. How do you recommend students now start networking?
Yeah, networking is a good one, you know, and it might not always be what you think it is. So so I have this story that I always remember. There were, I think my first 3 years of going to Cal State Long Beach, there was another student that I kind of knew that was also pursuing industrial design. Eventually, I think our 3rd year in, he ended up switching to BA, and I never saw him again, and didn't think twice. And then, like I told you guys before, I took this class 3 times just to get the units. Well, I also took random other classes to get units. And as I was taking that random other class, he was also in it as well. And I remember the very first day of walking into that class, I knew I didn't know anybody. I walked in, I looked around, I didn't know anybody, but I saw him, and he was the only vague person that I knew. And so I just thought like, I'm just gonna sit next to him and talk to him and be friends with him. I just clearly remember thinking that for some reason. And so I sat next to him, and we had this same exact phone, and we bonded between that. We're like, oh yeah, it's a cool phone. And then once the class was over, I never saw him again after that. And so I went to go off and do my industrial design thing, and he went off and graduated a year earlier than me, because BA is shorter. And then during my senior year, I got a random email and it was from him out of the blue. And it said, hey, Jimmy, can you send me your portfolio? We're looking for an industrial designer. And I was like, wow, like, yeah, I'll send my portfolio, because, you know, I'm in senior year and I'm going to look for a job pretty soon. So sent my portfolio, went in for the interview, and that was the job at Kingston Technology. That was my very first opportunity. And so opportunities and networking could come in the smallest ways, whether it's you talking to your buddies, just being in class and being around all your fellow classmates, because you never know where they're gonna wind up. And if you are a talented student who you guys got along well, and they know that they can rely on you, they'll probably think of you when they are also looking for a position to get filled, and they'll reach out to you. So it's very interesting when it comes to that. And building relationships with your professors, I think was a good one for me too. That had allowed me to get that position to teach, is just building a relationship with my professors, because you guys are in that hub now where you guys are all going to class together, and you might not think of it as you're networking with each other, but you certainly are. If you compare it to somebody who's only learning industrial design through YouTube, they might be better than you. They might be learning a lot more, but they don't have that network. And so in comparison to when you're going to school and you're talking to all these people and all these opportunities are popping up, like, it's always good to really recognize that and use that as much to your advantage.
And are you open to networking with students? I would assume finding through normal channels, you're open to reaching out.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. My goal is to really like, industrial design and creating awesome products is fun and cool, and I've done it so many times up until this point. And what I really like deep down inside of what I really find to be very rewarding is helping other people, especially with something that I know I'm good at, and just going through the journey myself and sharing it with you, and hopefully if you can take that knowledge and also apply it and achieve your own goals, I find that extremely rewarding. And so I really hope to work with a lot more students and just help guide them to achieve their own goals. And so feel free to always reach out to me. The email that I prefer is askjimmydesign@gmail.com. Pretty simple. Just askjimmydesign@gmail.com to shoot me an email, and we could go from there.
Awesome. Thank you, Jimmy. All right, I'm going to throw together a couple of things here regarding because you're working in a corporate structure, which is more of a salary based, but working in either a consultancy or as a startup for yourself, it's more project or based on what you earn directly. How do you see yourself taking that step or wanting to go in that route of running your own thing, or do you enjoy the structure of corporate?
That question hits very close to home, more than you would think. I think a lot of industrial designers, and not even industrial design, just professionals, after maybe 5 years, they start thinking, what would it actually be like for me to start my own business? Should I take the risk in leaving my company? They call it the golden handcuffs, which is, a salary and an annual bonus and, paid vacation hours. And so you'll be leaving that all behind to try to pursue something that may or may not work out for you. And so I always commend anybody that makes that leap to try it. And that's something that I've thought about for quite a while. And we'll see if it happens.
Good elusive answer. I like it. Okay, so now this comes to less about design and more about how you as a designer think about your projects. Do you believe that it's good for a designer to have strong values regarding sustainability and thinking about how your designs impact the world?
Mhm.
And how do you affect that in your career if you in fact do?
Yeah, that's an incredibly good question. So when I first started off, I didn't care about that at all. You're just doing my best to make the best products that I can, and learn as much as I can my first couple of years. And then once HyperX got sold to HP, HP's initiative is actually they're actually one of the leading companies when it comes to sustainability. And I believe that's a great mission to have, just because you might not think about it, but there's a lot of waste. There's a ton of trash, and as in the industry, like, we're developing all these products and they have a certain life cycle, and then once the life cycle is done, you're like, where does it go? A lot of the times it just goes into the trash, and over time it just accumulates, and eventually it just seems like there's like an ending point. And so there's like this idea of like, well, you do it for the money, but then there's like a limit to it. You kind of could just tell. And so I'm very happy to work at a company like HP, who has such a strong initiative when it comes to reusable plastics. And we're working really hard to implement that into our HyperX products. And to add to that too, it helps a lot that the company has that initiative. It's really difficult for you as this like tiny designer to be like, we should do that, because it's a big move. Like it's a big move. So to work at a company that has that initiative is a good start.
You're kind of fighting upstream in a a profit culture if that doesn't align, and working your way up to where your decisions have more value in the company. I think as time goes on, you get those opportunities, but identifying companies that align with your own values is probably a bigger decision than a lot of people give credit to. When you know, again, maybe an awesome job, and then you realize the awesome job you're doing is destroying the planet, if you will.
Yeah.
Or you may find that same fulfillment within another corporate structure that has a mission like yours. So an interesting question, we normally get students ask, who are your industrial designers that influence your design? But did you have any that influenced you when you were starting your YouTube channel?
So like other social media influencers that really affected me was so I wanted to originally design cars, and that's how I discovered industrial design. And one person that I found on YouTube that incredibly inspired me was this guy named Sangwon Seok. He's a Korean car designer. He sketches extremely well, mostly just sketches, no like 3D or render or anything. And I remember going into the library and printing out all of his sketches and hanging them up all on my wall in my little studio, and just wishing like, and just trying like, I wish I can be as good as him one day. And so he inspired me incredibly. He's the one that stands out the most to me, and so yes, Sangwon's the man. I would watch his YouTube videos in slow motion, just to see his techniques. So luckily YouTube has that feature where you can watch things in slow motion. So I definitely did that and just analyzed his technique, and just analyzed what he started with, how he started the sketch, and then how he added in the details slowly over time. And so, yeah, I learned a lot by observation.
We got a quick question that's an add-on is, would you mind adding his name into the chat so they can do a search?
Oh, absolutely.
And your email is askjimmydesign@gmail.com, correct?
Askjimmydesign@gmail.com.
Yep. Good. All right. So what's that? No S.
Yeah, no S. I'll
No
type
S.
it.
All right. And our final question for the night is, we kind of talked about this before everybody hopped on, is how do you feel about working remotely, and what percentage of your job is both remote and working on your own and doing meetings, all that sort of stuff? What's the kind of balance?
Yeah. I've been working from home ever since the lockdown. So March of 2020, right? Something like that. And it's been really great, just because I hated work. Prior to that, I hated showing up to work, feeling like I had to be there 8 hours a day, leave at 6 o'clock. Where did my whole day go? I couldn't do anything. And then, you know, you do the same thing day after day, and you kind of just feel like you're a little bit locked in. And so ever since COVID happened, I loved staying home and kind of breaking up that mundanity, kind of getting the time back to myself. But I think over time, I learned that that even though you still have a lot of time to yourself, you still also are quite limited as well. Like I can't just take the day off and go to Santa Barbara and spend it with my little brother. I still have to work even if I'm at home. But it's a lot better than where it used to be. And then now actually going going into the office at least once a week has actually become incredibly enjoyable. It's almost like the highlight to my week in a way, because when I'm at home all day, I don't really see anybody, just my girlfriend, and I see her a lot. And so going into the office and getting interaction, and just talking to people, it's a nice thing to do. So in meetings, I would say I spend about maybe an hour to an hour and a half a day in meetings. And then the remainder of the time, I'm actually doing like real industrial design work.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for the questions tonight. And thank you, Jimmy, for spending a lot of extra time answering the questions. I think you really helped give some feedback on what it's like to walk in your shoes as a designer, and very much appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.